The champagne flute shattered against the campaign bus floor just as thunder cracked overhead. I stood frozen in my Louboutins, watching tiny rivers of expensive bubbly snake between scattered glass shards, while outside, rain pelted the metal roof like impatient fingers drumming. 30 seconds ago, I'd been Senator Margaret Jones, the composed, unflappable rising star of Albuquerque politics. Now I was just a woman stranded on a dark highway with a dead engine and a phone showing 0 bars. "Damn it all to hell," I muttered, kicking off my heels and reaching for the emergency flashlight. The bus driver had already disappeared under the hood, but his increasingly colorful curses told me everything I needed to know. We weren't going anywhere tonight. I pressed my forehead against the cool window glass, watching headlights approach then disappear into the darkness. None stopped. Of course they wouldn't. Who pulls over for a mysterious bus at midnight? The rain intensified, drowning out everything except my own heartbeat. Tonight was supposed to be my victory lap after clinching the primary nomination, not some pathetic breakdown scene from a B-movie. A soft tap on the glass made me jump. Through the rain-streaked window, I made out a slender figure in a hooded raincoat, face obscured except for a pair of questioning brown eyes. I hesitated, years of political safety training screaming caution, but something about those eyes made my hand move toward the door latch. "Car trouble?" the stranger asked, rainwater cascading off her hood as she tilted her head. Her voice was husky, confident, not the voice of someone planning to murder a politician on a deserted road. "Bus trouble," I corrected, noting how her blonde hair caught the emergency lights when she pushed back her hood. "Alternator, we think." Her laugh was unexpected, warm and genuine. "You sound awfully certain for someone standing there in stocking feet." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. Mechanical engineering was my minor before politics swallowed me whole. "Well, Senator," she said, reaching into her pocket and producing a small toolkit that gleamed in the dim light. "Let's see if we can get you back on the campaign trail." I watched, transfixed, as she moved to the front of the bus, her movements efficient and graceful despite the downpour plastering her clothes to her frame. She spoke quietly with my driver, then slid beneath the bus without hesitation, unconcerned about the mud soaking into her jeans. The rain smelled of ozone and possibilities, and something twisted in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years, something dangerous for a woman whose life played out in polling numbers and calculated public appearances. 40 minutes later, she stood before me, streaked with grease, rain dripping from her eyelashes as the bus engine hummed to life behind her. "Catherine," she said, extending a hand that trembled slightly from cold or something else. "Catherine Robinson." I took her hand, surprised by its warmth despite the chill. "I don't know how to thank you. Your policies on healthcare reform are thanks enough," she replied with a half smile that carried secrets. "Though I disagree with your stance on corporate tax incentives." As she turned to leave, I called after her, "Wait, at least let me offer you a ride." Catherine glanced back at me, raindrops glistening on her neck like tiny diamonds. "Some journeys were meant to make alone, Senator Jones." She disappeared into the stormy night, leaving nothing but muddy footprints and questions. The scent of motor oil and something distinctly feminine, vanilla, perhaps, lingered in the air. It would be 3 weeks before I saw her again, and 6 months before I understood why my campaign bus had mysteriously broken down on the one stretch of highway where Catherine Robinson took her midnight drives to clear her head after fighting with her girlfriend. It took me exactly 17 hours to break my own rule about not Googling strangers. The mysterious Catherine Robinson had left an impression like a thumbprint on glass, subtle but unmistakable. Her confidence in that storm. The way she'd mentioned my healthcare policy with such casual intimacy. By noon the next day, I was hunched over my laptop like a teenager stalking a crush. Looking for opposition research? My campaign manager, Derek, appeared behind me with his perpetual cup of coffee and perpetual frown. I minimized the browser window with embarrassing speed. "Just checking something." I waved him away, waiting until his footsteps retreated before reopening my search. The University of New Mexico's alumni page gave me what I needed. Catherine Robinson, political science major, graduated summa cum laude 7 years ago. A Facebook profile with strict privacy settings. A LinkedIn showing a scattered employment history, political internships, research positions. Most recently, a logistics coordinator for a nonprofit that had folded 3 months ago. I shouldn't have cared. I had a fundraising dinner in 2 hours, a speech to finalize, and polling numbers to review, but I couldn't shake the memory of her standing in the rain, utterly self-possessed. So I did something impulsive. I sent her a message. Nothing elaborate, just a coffee invitation, a thank you for her roadside assistance. She replied within the hour. The Pinewood Cafe, tomorrow, 10 a.m. The coffee shop smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread, a welcome respite from the campaign bus's perpetual scent of ambition and stale coffee. I spotted her immediately, tucked into a corner booth, blonde hair twisted into a casual knot, fingers tapping against a worn paperback. No makeup, faded jeans, and a quiet intensity that made the room seem to orbit around her. "You found me," I said, sliding into the booth. "Senator Jones," she replied, the corner of her mouth quirking up. I believe it was the other way around. Her directness caught me off guard, like a splash of cold water. "Fair enough," I shrugged, oddly comfortable with being called out. "I was curious about the woman who rescued my campaign bus. And fixed your alternator," she added with that same half-smile. "Most politicians would have summoned roadside assistance and stayed safely inside. I'm not most politicians. That remains to be seen." She closed her book, Machiavelli's The Prince, I noted with amusement, and fixed those brown eyes on me. "So, why am I really here, Senator?" For a woman who commanded press conferences and debate stages, I found myself surprisingly tongue-tied. "Your resume," I finally managed. "It's impressive." Catherine laughed, the sound rich and unfiltered. "My resume is a disaster. 3 jobs in 2 years, a failed nonprofit, and political science degree gathering dust." "What happened?" "Politics happened," she shrugged, her fingers circling the rim of her mug. "I believe in changing the system, but the system doesn't make it easy, especially for someone without connections or wealth." Her honesty stripped away my well-rehearsed political veneer. For the next hour we talked, really talked, about everything from healthcare reform to her dissertation on grassroots movements. She challenged me, disagreed with me, made me defend positions I'd recited by rote for years. "I need someone like you on my team," I heard myself say as our cups emptied. The words surprised me as much as they seemed to surprise her. "I don't play well with political machines, Senator." Her voice was soft but firm. "I'm not offering you a cog position. I need a personal assistant who thinks differently, who'll tell me when I'm full of shit. Your campaign manager would hate me." "Derek already hates everyone," I countered, feeling something electric and dangerous building between us. "The question is, could you work for someone whose corporate tax policy you disagree with?" Catherine leaned forward, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something earthy and subtle. I could work for someone willing to have their mind changed. 2 days later, Derek was livid, my staff was confused, and Catherine Robinson had her own desk outside my office. I told myself it was her qualifications, her unique perspective. I told myself it had nothing to do with how the campaign bus felt different with her aboard, how rooms seemed brighter when she entered them. I was lying, of course. But at 48, with a political career balanced on a knife's edge, lies were sometimes all that kept the world from tilting sideways. Catherine became indispensable with alarming speed. Within weeks, she'd reorganized my entire campaign strategy, identified 3 key demographic gaps we'd been missing, and somehow convinced Derek that most of her ideas were actually his. I watched her work with a fascination that went beyond professional admiration. "Your approval rating with women under 30 has jumped 8 points, Catherine announced one evening, sliding a data sheet across my desk. The campaign office had emptied hours ago, but we remained, surrounded by takeout containers and strategy documents. "And that's because of the community college initiative?" I asked, trying to focus on the numbers instead of how she'd rolled up her sleeves, revealing slender forearms and a delicate silver bracelet. "Partly." She perched on the edge of my desk, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something with sandalwood notes, "but it's mostly because you've started speaking like a human instead of a policy manual." I laughed, surprised by her candor but appreciating it. "Are you saying I was robotic before? Let's just say there's a reason they called you Ice Queen Jones in the press." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Now they're seeing the woman I met in the rainstorm. Something shifted in the air between us, a current of electricity that had been building for weeks. I cleared my throat and stood, needing distance, needing to remember boundaries. "It's getting late. We should call it a night." But she didn't move, just watched me with those perceptive brown eyes. "You're worried about tomorrow's debate?" James Taylor has 20 years of political experience on me and has never lost a debate. I sighed, rolling tension from my shoulders. And his latest attack ads about my lack of family values are hitting harder than I'd like to admit. "Because you're divorced?" Catherine shook her head in disgust. "That's straight out of the 1950s playbook." "No, because I've never had children. Apparently that makes me unable to understand real American families." The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. "Then we'll make sure every parent watching knows exactly how your education plan will help their children," Catherine said firmly, standing to face me. "Taylor can wave his family photos all he wants, but your policies speak louder." The debate was brutal. Taylor stuck to his strategy, painting me as an out-of-touch career woman while highlighting his 4 children and 6 grandchildren. I stuck to Catherine's approach, direct answers, personal stories connecting policy to real lives, and refusing to engage in his baiting. "Senator Jones, your opponent has suggested your lack of traditional family experience makes you unqualified to represent family interests. Your response?" The moderator's question hung in the air like a trap. I felt a moment of panic before catching Catherine's eye in the wings. She gave me a subtle nod, and suddenly I knew exactly what to say. "My mother raised 3 children while working 2 jobs after my father died," I began, abandoning my prepared remarks. "She taught me that family isn't about photographs on a desk. It's about showing up, doing the hard work, and building a world where everyone gets a fair chance. That's the family value I'm fighting for." The audience erupted in applause. Catherine's expression, pride mixed with something warmer, made my heart race faster than the debate had. Hours later, surrounded by celebrating staff, Catherine handed me a glass of champagne. "The first post-debate polls have you up by 3 points." "We did it," I said, clinking my glass against hers. "You did it," she corrected, her fingers briefly touching mine. The celebration ended abruptly when Derek burst in, face grim. "We have a problem." He slapped a tablet on the table, displaying an attack ad already circulating online. It showed a manipulated image of me at a gay rights rally years ago, insinuating scandals and secret relationships. "They're desperate," Catherine said, her voice tight. "Going for character assassination when policy failed." "It's working," Derek snapped. "Conservative donors are calling, threatening to pull support." As the room erupted in crisis management, Catherine's hand found mine under the table, a brief, steady pressure. When I met her eyes, something passed between us, something dangerous and thrilling and absolutely terrifying. Later that night, after everyone but Catherine had left, I found myself standing too close to her as we reviewed damage control strategies. "We'll get through this," she said softly. "How can you be so sure?" I asked, suddenly aware of how close her lips were to mine. "Because," she whispered, "the truth is always stronger than lies." And then, with campaign posters watching and political careers hanging in the balance, I kissed her. The polls were better than any of us had dared hope. 3 weeks after the debate, my numbers had surged 12 points, putting me ahead of Taylor for the first time. The attack ads had backfired spectacularly, making him look desperate and outdated, while I appeared dignified in contrast. At least, that's what the focus groups said. I'd almost convinced myself that the kiss had never happened. Neither Catherine nor I had mentioned it, slipping back into our professional rhythms with practiced ease. Almost. But there were moments, her fingers brushing mine as she handed me briefing papers, the way her eyes lingered when she thought I wasn't looking, the electricity that filled any room we occupied together. My body remembered what my mind tried to forget. "We deserve to celebrate," Catherine announced, appearing in my hotel suite doorway with a bottle of Dom Perignon. She'd shed her usual professional attire for jeans and a silk blouse that caught the light when she moved. "Even Derek says we can take one night off." I laughed, setting aside the speech I'd been editing. "Did you drug him?" "Derek never approves nights off. He's discovered that tequila exists." She grinned, stepping into the room and letting the door swing shut behind her. "He won't be calling before noon tomorrow." Something about the moment felt precarious, balanced on a knife edge. We were alone, doors closed with a bottle of champagne and all our careful boundaries suddenly paper-thin. I should have made an excuse. I should have remembered I was Margaret Jones, potential senator, with a career built on calculated decisions. Instead, I said, "I'll get glasses." We settled on the balcony overlooking Albuquerque's glittering lights, the night air carrying the scent of desert sage and anticipation. One glass became 2, then 3. Conversation flowed easier with each sip, professional topics giving way to personal ones. "Why politics?" Catherine asked, tucking her legs beneath her on the lounge chair. "With your engineering background, you could have had a much quieter life." I traced the rim of my glass, considering. My mother lost her house during the banking crisis of '08. The system failed her and no one cared. I wanted to be someone who could change that system. I looked up at her. "What about you? What drove you to political science?" "Idealism?" she admitted with a self-deprecating laugh. "I thought I could change the world with good policies and rational arguments. And now?" Her eyes met mine, suddenly serious. "Now I think change happens one person at a time. Finding the right people who can make a difference, supporting them." The way she looked at me made my chest tighten. "Like you." "You give me too much credit," I whispered, feeling exposed in ways that had nothing to do with physical nakedness. "And you don't give yourself enough." She leaned forward, refilling my glass, though I hardly needed more. "You know why I took this job? I followed your career for years. That night on the highway wasn't coincidence. I recognized your campaign bus." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "You planned that?" "Not the breakdown," she clarified quickly, "but when I saw who it was, I couldn't drive past. I had to meet you." The champagne had lowered my defenses, made everything feel dreamlike and possible. "Why?" "Because you were different." She moved closer, our knees almost touching. "Because every speech you gave, every policy you championed, I could see the person behind the politician. I wanted to know her." I don't remember who moved first this time, only that suddenly her lips were on mine, tasting of champagne and possibility. My fingers tangled in her hair, pulling her closer as years of control and careful isolation crumbled between us. "We shouldn't," I murmured against her mouth, even as my hands betrayed my words by sliding beneath her silk blouse. "Probably not," she agreed, guiding me backward into the suite. What followed was a blur of sensation, the cool hotel sheets against heated skin, the soft gasp Catherine made when I found sensitive places, the weight of her above me. We moved together with unexpected familiarity, as though we'd done this dance 100 times before. Her touch was reverent yet hungry, drawing responses from my body I'd forgotten were possible. I lost myself in the map of her skin, the rhythm of her breathing, the way she whispered my name, Margaret, not Senator, when pleasure overtook her. Afterward, tangled in sheets with the city lights painting patterns across our skin, reality began its slow, unwelcome return. I'd crossed a line I'd never even allowed myself to approach, with my assistant. In the middle of a campaign. The panic must have shown on my face because Catherine propped herself up on one elbow, studying me. "Regrets already?" she asked softly. I closed my eyes, unable to meet her gaze. "This complicates everything. Only if we let it." Her fingers traced patterns on my shoulder, sending shivers down my spine. "Catherine, I'm running for Senate. If this got out..." Her kiss silenced me, gentle but insistent. "Tomorrow," she whispered against my lips. "We'll worry tomorrow." I surrendered, knowing I was making a choice that might destroy everything I'd built. But God help me, I couldn't bring myself to care. Morning arrived with unforgiving brightness and a splitting headache that had nothing to do with champagne. Catherine slept beside me, golden hair spilled across the pillow, one hand still loosely entwined with mine. Reality crashed down like a physical weight. What had I done? I extracted myself carefully from the tangle of sheets and limbs, retrieving scattered clothing with quiet desperation. In the harsh bathroom light, I hardly recognized myself. Hair disheveled, a small mark blooming on my collarbone, eyes wide with panic. I gripped the marble counter until my knuckles whitened. "Margaret?" Catherine's sleep-rough voice called from the bedroom. "You okay?" No, I wasn't okay. I was a candidate who'd just slept with her assistant. I was a woman who'd spent decades building a reputation for cool competence, now undone by a night of... what? Passion? Weakness? I splashed cold water on my face before emerging. Catherine had pulled on her blouse and underwear, sitting cross-legged on the rumpled bed. The morning light caught her profile, turning her into something from a Renaissance painting, all soft curves and golden light. My heart clenched painfully. "We need to talk about this," I said, hating how formal my voice sounded. "About how it was a mistake?" She raised an eyebrow, reading me with uncomfortable accuracy. "About how it can't happen again?" I sank into a chair, feeling every one of my 48 years. "Catherine, be realistic. I'm your boss. I'm 20 years older than you. I'm in the middle of a campaign that could implode if this got out." 17, she corrected quietly. "What?" "The age difference. It's 17 years, not 20. Her lips curved in a sad smile. "And I know exactly who and what you are, Margaret. I didn't stumble drunkenly into your bed without understanding the complications. Then you understand why this can't continue." The words felt acidic in my mouth. Catherine stood, crossing to where I sat. She knelt before me, taking my hands in hers, her expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. "What I understand is that for the first time since I've known you, you're making decisions from fear instead of conviction." Her words hit like a physical blow. Before I could respond, my phone rang, Derek's ringtone, shrill and demanding. We both flinched. "You should get that," Catherine said, rising and collecting the rest of her clothes. "I'll use the other bathroom." By the time I finished assuring Derek that yes, I would be ready for the women's breakfast in 90 minutes, Catherine had transformed back into my professional assistant. Hair neatly styled, crisp blazer buttoned, tablet in hand. "Your schedule today," she said, all business, sliding the tablet toward me. If not for the slight tremble in her hands, I might have believed the night had never happened. "Catherine," I began, not knowing how to finish. "It's fine," she interrupted, her smile not reaching her eyes. "We're adults. We can be professional." And somehow, amazingly, we were. Through breakfast speeches and policy meetings, fundraising calls and staff briefings, we maintained a perfect facade of normality. Only I noticed how carefully we avoided physical contact, how our usual easy banter had crystallized into something brittle. The carefully constructed bubble burst at 4:30 p.m. when my hotel room phone rang. "There's an Emily Flores in the lobby insisting she's a personal friend," the concierge informed me. "She's quite persistent." Emily. My oldest friend, former college roommate, and the one person who could read me like an open book. Perfect timing. "Send her up," I sighed, knowing resistance was futile. 5 minutes later, Emily burst through my door in a whirlwind of expensive perfume and louder than necessary laughter. "Surprise," she announced, dropping designer luggage by the door. "I decided your campaign needed some friendly moral support." She froze mid-embrace, eyes narrowing as she studied my face. "What's wrong? You look different." "Just campaign stress," I lied, hugging her back stiffly. "What are you doing here, Em?" "Can't a girl surprise her bestie?" She kicked off her heels and made herself comfortable on my couch. "Besides, I saw that disgusting attack ad and figured you could use friendly reinforcements." Before I could respond, a knock came at the door. Catherine stood there, tablet in hand, stopping short at the sight of Emily. "Sorry," she said, professional mask firmly in place. "I didn't realize you had company." Something flickered in Emily's expression as she looked between us, something shrewd and knowing that made my stomach drop. "Emily Flores," she introduced herself, extending a manicured hand. "Maggie's oldest friend. Catherine Robinson, Senator Jones's assistant." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees during their handshake. "I'll come back later." As the door closed behind Catherine, Emily turned to me with raised eyebrows. Well, that explains the glow." "There's nothing to explain," I said too quickly. Emily just laughed, patting the couch beside her. "Honey, I've known you for 30 years. You think I can't tell when Margaret Jones is sleeping with someone?" I buried my face in my hands, feeling my carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around me. Emily stayed for 3 excruciating days, during which Catherine maintained a professional distance so perfect, it was almost an art form. When our eyes did meet, over briefing books or across crowded rallies, I saw the same hunger I felt, carefully wrapped in layers of restraint. "Your little assistant is quite devoted," Emily observed on her final morning, watching Catherine managing the press line outside a community center. "She hasn't left your side for more than 10 minutes. She's good at her job," I replied neutrally, signing the autograph a young woman had thrust toward me. I bet she is. Emily's smirk made me want to strangle her, though she doesn't seem to like me much. Don't be ridiculous. I forced a smile for the cameras, waving as we moved toward the campaign bus. She looks at me like I'm competition. Emily lowered her voice as we climbed aboard. Which is fascinating, since you claim nothing's happening. I was spared from responding by Derek's appearance, tablet in hand. We've got a problem. His voice was tight, face grim. Senator, you need to see this. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. Catherine and me leaving a restaurant last week, her hand on my lower back, my head bent close to hers as we laughed at something. Out of context, it looked intimate, because it was intimate. Where did this come from? I demanded, heart pounding. Twitter 10 minutes ago. Derek looked like he might throw up. Taylor's campaign manager retweeted it with some suggestive comments. The story exploded like wildfire. By afternoon, 3 news outlets had run the photo with headlines asking if I had hidden relationships within my staff. Conservative blogs were having a field day, painting me as a hypocrite who preached professional ethics while seducing employees. This is insane, Catherine fumed during our emergency strategy meeting. It's a photo of 2 colleagues leaving dinner. They're manufacturing a scandal from nothing. But her eyes wouldn't meet mine, and we both knew it wasn't nothing. The camera had captured a moment of unguarded connection, visible to anyone looking closely enough. Derek paced the hotel suite like a caged animal. We need to get ahead of this. Issue a statement clarifying your professional relationship. Maybe have Catherine step back from public appearances for a while. That looks like an admission of guilt, Catherine argued. Margaret has done nothing wrong. We've done nothing wrong. The slight emphasis on we've made my chest tighten. Perception is reality in politics, Derek snapped. And right now, the perception is. I know what the perception is, I interrupted, rubbing my temples. The headache that had started that morning was now a full-blown migraine. Give us the room, please. When everyone but Catherine had filed out, I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. He's right, you know. About what? Hiding me away like I'm something shameful? Her voice was tight with hurt. About perception. I looked up at her, wishing I could cross the room and pull her close. This campaign isn't just about me. It's about all the people who believe in what we're trying to accomplish. Catherine knelt before me, close but not touching. And what message does it send if you let them weaponize a fabricated scandal against you? If you start making decisions based on lies? It's not entirely a fabrication, though, is it? I whispered, the words like glass in my throat. She was silent for a long moment. No, she finally admitted. But we haven't done anything wrong, Margaret. Having feelings isn't a crime. A soft knock interrupted us. Derek poked his head in, expression grim. The Westfield Group is on the phone. They're threatening to pull their funding unless we clarify the situation. The Westfield Group represented my largest campaign donors, conservative-leaning business owners who'd taken a chance on me despite my more progressive stances on certain issues. Without their backing, the campaign would be crippled. After Derek left, Catherine stood, decision written across her face. I'll draft my resignation letter. Catherine, no. It's the obvious solution. Her voice was steady, but I could see the cost in her eyes. Remove the source of the scandal, protect the campaign. I won't accept it, I said fiercely. We can weather this. Can we? She gestured to the phones ringing off the hook, the emails flooding my inbox. Every minute we spend fighting this distraction is a minute we're not talking about your policies, your vision. I won't be the reason you lose. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Attached was another photo, Catherine entering my hotel room late at night, 3 days ago. The message read, more where this came from. Drop out or they all go public. I wordlessly handed her the phone. Her face paled as she read it. Someone's been watching us, she whispered. The walls seemed to close in around me. Everything I'd worked for, everything I believed in, all of it hanging by a thread because I'd allowed myself one night of honesty. Emily found me on the balcony at midnight, staring into the darkness of Albuquerque's skyline. I'd sent Catherine home hours ago, unable to bear the weight of her sacrifice, the resignation letter she'd placed on my desk despite my protests. You're making a mistake, Emily said without preamble, draping a cashmere wrap around my shoulders against the desert chill. I didn't turn. Which one? I've made so many lately. Letting her go. Emily leaned against the railing beside me. That girl looks at you the way I always hoped someone would look at me. It doesn't matter how she looks at me, I said, the words tasting bitter. The campaign. Screw the campaign. Emily's interruption was sharp enough to make me turn. In 30 years of friendship, I'd rarely heard that edge in her voice. Maggie, do you remember what you told me when I was considering divorcing Richard? I remained silent, knowing exactly where she was heading. You said, living a life that looks perfect to everyone else but feels empty to you isn't success, it's slow suicide. She turned me to face her. That was 15 years ago, and I've never forgotten it. You gave me permission to be honest about what I needed. This is different, I protested weakly. There are thousands of people counting on me. And what good will you be to them if you're just another politician who sacrificed everything authentic about herself to win? She studied my face with uncomfortable intensity. I've watched you these past few days with Catherine. I've never seen you like that before, not with Robert during your marriage, not with anyone. Like what? I whispered. Alive, Emily said simply. Like you finally woke up. Her words cracked something open inside me, a truth I'd been trying desperately to bury beneath duty and ambition. I sank into a chair, the political fortress I'd built around myself crumbling. I'm terrified, Em, I admitted, voice breaking. Not just of losing the election. I'm terrified of feeling this much, of wanting something, someone, this badly. That's how you know it's real. She squeezed my hand. The question is, what are you going to do about it? After Emily left for her red-eye flight, I sat alone with that question echoing in my mind. Dawn found me still awake, watching the sky lighten over the mountains, when my phone rang. Catherine's number. I couldn't sleep, she said without greeting. I keep thinking about what happens next. I haven't accepted your resignation, I reminded her. Margaret. Her sigh traveled through the connection. You know it's the right move politically. Maybe I'm tired of making the right move politically. The word surprised even me. Maybe I want to make the right move for me, for once. Silence stretched between us, heavy with possibility. What would that look like? She finally asked, voice carefully neutral. I don't know, I admitted. I've spent so long calculating every decision, I'm not sure I remember how to follow my heart. Another pause then. Does your heart have anything to say about this? I closed my eyes, feeling something unfurling inside me, something brave and reckless and true. It says I'm not ready to let you go. After we hung up, I called Derek, issuing instructions that made him sputter with objections. Then I drafted a statement of my own, ignoring his increasingly panicked texts as I hit send. The town hall that evening was packed beyond capacity, tension thick in the air. Everyone had seen the photos, read the speculation. As I took the stage, Catherine stood at the back of the room, against my explicit wishes to stay away. Our eyes met briefly before I turned to the audience. Before we begin, I said into the sudden silence, abandoning my prepared opening. I'd like to address the rumors circulating about my personal life. The crowd stirred, journalists leaning forward eagerly. Derek, in the wings, looked like he might faint. Politics has a way of turning human connections into scandals, I continued, my voice growing stronger, of making us afraid to be authentic, to be vulnerable. I've spent my career trying to be the perfect candidate, unassailable, beyond reproach. But perfection isn't leadership. Honesty is. Rain began pattering against the windows, a sudden desert storm brewing outside, matching the intensity in the room. I won't comment on my personal relationships because they are exactly that, personal. What I will say is this. I am a whole person, not just a candidate. I have made mistakes, felt joy, experienced loss. If that makes me unqualified in some people's eyes, then so be it. I gripped the podium tighter. But I believe voters deserve representatives who are real, not robots programmed to say the right thing. The silence that followed felt eternal. Then, from somewhere in the back, a single person began to applaud. Others joined, the sound building until it filled the room. Through my tears, I found Catherine's face in the crowd. She was clapping too, rain-soaked from her walk inside, eyes never leaving mine. Something electric passed between us, a promise of conversations yet to come. The aftermath of my speech was nuclear. Half my donors pulled out within 24 hours, Conservative pundits had a field day, calling me everything from emotionally unstable to morally compromised. My inbox overflowed with messages ranging from heartfelt support to vicious attacks. Derek cornered me in my hotel suite, face ashen. Westfield just called. They're withdrawing all financial support, effective immediately. He dropped a stack of polling data on my coffee table. We're hemorrhaging among older conservatives, and Taylor's campaign is running new ads questioning your judgment. I nodded, strangely calm. And the other demographics? He hesitated. That's unexpected. Support among women under 40 is up 17 points. Small donors have tripled since yesterday. Social media sentiment is running 2-to-1 positive. Because authenticity resonates, Catherine said from the doorway, entering with her tablet. Though she'd rescinded her resignation, our professional relationship remained strained, careful. People are tired of politicians who never show their humanity. Derek scowled. Humanity doesn't win elections. Money and reliable voting blocks win elections. Maybe it's time we changed that equation, I countered, accepting the coffee Catherine handed me, our fingers brushing briefly. The strategy meeting that followed was heated. Half my team wanted to walk back my comments, issue clarifying statements that would appease conservative donors. The other half, led by Catherine, argued for doubling down, making authenticity the cornerstone of our campaign. Westfield represents 40% of our remaining funds, my finance director pointed out. Without them, we can't compete in advertising for the final push. But we can dominate earned media and social platforms, Catherine countered. And grassroots donations are surging, if we redirect resources. This is insane, Derek interrupted. We're throwing away a winnable race because the senator decided to have some sort of midlife crisis. The room went silent. Catherine's expression hardened, but before she could speak, I stood. That's enough, I said quietly. Everyone out except Derek and Catherine. When the room cleared, I faced my campaign manager. I understand your frustration, but if questioning whether politics should require complete personal sacrifice is a midlife crisis, then perhaps we need more of them in Washington. Derek ran a hand through his thinning hair. Margaret, I've been with you since your first state Senate race. I believe in you. But this... He gestured vaguely between Catherine and me. Whatever this is, it's going to cost you everything. Not everything, I said softly. Just the election, maybe. And if winning requires me to be less than honest about who I am, perhaps it's not a victory worth having. That's a luxury most politicians can't afford, he muttered. It shouldn't be. I placed a hand on his shoulder. I need you with me, Derek, but I understand if you can't support this direction. He studied my face for a long moment. 20 years and I've never seen you this certain about anything. He sighed heavily. God help me, I'm still in, but we need a miracle. After he left, Catherine and I stood in weighted silence. We hadn't been alone together since that night. Thank you, I finally said. For fighting for this, for me, always. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She took a halting step toward me, then stopped. Margaret, My phone rang, Taylor's campaign office. I answered on speakerphone, Catherine moving closer to listen. Senator Jones, Taylor's campaign manager's voice oozed false sympathy. I'm calling to offer you a dignified exit path. We have more photos, quite compelling ones. Drop out now, cite personal reasons, and they never see daylight. I met Catherine's eyes, saw the same cold anger I felt. Are you threatening me, Mr. Hansen? Offering mercy, he corrected smoothly. The voters of this state deserve a senator focused on their needs, not personal distractions. The voters deserve honesty, I replied, surprised by my own calm. Release whatever you have. I'm not going anywhere. After hanging up, I expected panic or regret. Instead, I felt something like freedom, the liberation of having nothing left to lose. What now? Catherine asked, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something with notes of vanilla and amber. Now, I said, reaching for her hand, we finish this campaign on our terms. No more hiding, no more fear. Her fingers intertwined with mine, warm and steady. Whatever happens with the election, she whispered, I want you to know I'd choose you again, every time. And in that moment, with my career potentially crumbling around me, I knew with absolute clarity that I would too. Election night arrived with the peculiar hush that follows chaos. The final 2 weeks of the campaign had been a blur of town halls, media appearances, and grassroots rallies. Taylor's campaign had indeed released more photos, Catherine and I walking close together in a park, my hand on her shoulder during a late strategy session. But something strange happened. With each new revelation, more small donors flocked to my campaign. My inbox filled with messages from people sharing their own stories of authenticity and courage. I stood in my hotel suite, watching early returns trickle in on multiple screens. The room buzzed with staff and volunteers, the energy electric with hope and fear intermingled. Catherine moved through the crowd with practiced ease, fielding calls and coordinating our response team, professional to her core. But her eyes found mine across the room every few minutes, each glance a private conversation. Albuquerque District's reporting, Derek announced, looking up from his laptop. We're outperforming projections by 6 points. A cheer went up, quickly hushed as more results appeared. The race was razor thin, each new precinct potentially decisive. Hours ticked by, the room's mood swinging between elation and despair with each update. Near midnight, a hush fell as the major networks prepared to make their call. I felt Catherine's presence before I saw her, standing just behind my right shoulder. Close enough that her warmth reached me, but not so close as to create another photo opportunity. Whatever happens, she whispered, you've already won something more important than an election. The announcement came like a thunderclap. In an upset that defies all polling predictions, Margaret Jones has been elected to the United States Senate. The room erupted, staffers embraced, champagne corks popped, phones rang incessantly. Derek, tears streaming down his usually stoic face, pulled me into a bear hug. You magnificent, stubborn woman, he choked out. You actually did it. The victory speech, the interviews, the endless congratulations, all passed in a surreal blur. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I finally escaped to my suite, exhausted beyond measure but too wired to sleep. I'd just kicked off my shoes when a soft knock came at the door. Catherine stood there, holding a bottle of champagne, her professional mask finally slipping to reveal the woman beneath, vulnerable, hopeful, uncertain. Congratulations, Senator, she said, her voice catching slightly. I stepped aside to let her in, closing the door on the world outside. We did this together. The people elected you, Margaret, because you finally let them see you. She set the champagne on the coffee table, unopened. All of you. We stood facing each other in the half-light, the electricity that had always existed between us now unburdened by the campaign's constraints. What happens now? I asked, the question encompassing far more than political next steps. Catherine took a breath. Now I resign, properly this time. What? The word came out sharper than I intended. Why would you? Because I want to be with you, she interrupted, stepping closer. Openly, without ethics committees and political scandals, without undermining everything you just achieved. I felt dizzy with possibility, with the sudden expansion of my future beyond the campaign's narrow horizons. And if I said I needed you by my side in Washington, then I'd say find me another role, anywhere but on your official staff. She smiled, her fingers brushing mine. I want to support your career, Margaret, but not at the expense of us. Us, I repeated, the word like a prayer on my lips. I like the sound of that. Her kiss tasted of possibility and promise, of battles won and challenges still to come. When we finally broke apart, breathless, I rested my forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight? Tonight, she agreed, her hands sliding beneath my jacket. And tomorrow, and in Washington. What followed was different than our first night together, slower, deeper, more certain. Where before there had been desperation and forbidden thrill, now there was exploration and reverence. I memorized her body with my hands and lips, delighting in each gasp and sigh, in the way she whispered my name like salvation. She moved against me with exquisite patience, building sensations I'd forgotten were possible, pulling me over the edge again and again until I collapsed, trembling, in her arms. Dawn painted the room in gold when I awakened beside her. Her blonde hair spilled across my pillow, her breathing deep and even. In sleep, she looked younger, unburdened by the battles we'd fought together. I traced the curve of her shoulder lightly, marveling at how my life had transformed in mere months. From a woman alone with her ambition to this, a heart reawakened. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Saw your victory speech, never been prouder. Is she there with you? I smiled, typing back, yes, and she'll be with me in Washington too. Emily's reply came immediately. About damn time you chose happiness. Catherine stirred beside me, eyes blinking open, a slow smile spreading across her face as she registered where she was. Morning, Senator, she murmured, voice husky with sleep. Morning, I replied, pulling her closer. Ready to change the world? Her fingers intertwined with mine, steady and sure. With you? Always.